Okay, so imagine this. I'm sitting on my couch, just scrolling through my phone, completely oblivious to the bombshell that's about to drop and shatter my entire perception of my son, of my family, of my life, really. My sister, Sarah, calls me, and she's practically whispering, her voice laced with this frantic urgency. She starts telling me things about my son, Ethan, things that are so far-fetched, so utterly unbelievable, that I honestly thought she'd lost her mind. I scoffed, I laughed it off, I even got a little angry, because how dare she suggest such a thing about my son? But then, a tiny seed of doubt, no bigger than a mustard seed, was planted. And that seed, that insidious little doubt, pushed me to do something I never thought I'd do. I watched him. I spied on my own child. Was I completely out of line for even considering it, let alone going through with it? Tell me, honestly, if you would have done the same thing if you were in my shoes. Let me take you back a few months, before all of this chaos erupted. My life was, by all accounts, pretty normal, even idyllic. I'm a single mom, and Ethan, my beautiful, bright 16-year-old son, was my world. His father, Mark, left when Ethan was just a toddler, chasing some grand delusion of becoming a rock star, which, spoiler alert, never happened. So, it's always been just me and Ethan, a tight-knit duo against the world. We live in a cozy little house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows everyone and kids still ride bikes freely. Ethan was always a good kid, top of his class, a star on the school soccer team, respectful, helpful around the house, never gave me a moment of trouble. He was everything a mother could wish for. He had a great group of friends, a sweet girlfriend named Chloe, and seemed to be navigating the tumultuous waters of adolescence with remarkable ease. He even worked a part-time job at the local bookstore, saving up for a car, which I admired him for. I was so incredibly proud of him, beaming every time I talked about him to my friends or family. He was my greatest accomplishment, my biggest joy. My sister, Sarah, on the other hand, had always been a bit more skeptical. Not of Ethan specifically, but of pretty much everyone and everything. She's naturally a worry, a conspiracy theorist at heart, always seeing shadows where there are none. I loved her dearly, but her tendency to jump to conclusions often put a strain on our relationship. We'd had our fair share of arguments over the years, mostly about her outlandish theories or her constant need to point out potential dangers in every situation. But she was my sister, my only sibling, and despite her quirks, I knew she loved me and Ethan unconditionally. The first hint of trouble came subtly, almost imperceptibly. Ethan started staying out a little later than usual, coming home after his curfew, which was a strict 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends. When I asked him about it, he'd always have a perfectly reasonable explanation: a late study session at a friend's house, an impromptu movie night, a long soccer practice. I didn't think much of it at first. He was a teenager. After all, pushing boundaries is part of the territory. I'd give him a stern talking to, and he'd apologize profusely, promise it wouldn't happen again. And for a week or two, he'd be back to his usual self. But then the pattern would repeat. Then came the money. I noticed small amounts disappearing from my purse. Not huge sums, just 20 here, 50 there. I keep a pretty tight budget, so I always knew exactly how much I had. When I confronted Ethan, he denied it vehemently, looking genuinely hurt that I would even suggest such a thing. He said maybe I'd miscounted, or perhaps I'd spent it and forgotten. And honestly, I believed him. He'd never lied to me before, not about anything serious. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness, even though a tiny voice in the back of my head nagged at me. Then there were the whispers at school. Chloe, Ethan's girlfriend, stopped coming around. When I asked him about her, he just shrugged, mumbled something about them breaking up, and changed the subject. It struck me as odd, because they had seemed so happy together. I tried reaching out to Chloe's mom, but she was strangely evasive, saying only that Chloe was going through a tough time and needed space. Again, I pushed my concerns aside. Teenagers and their drama, right? I was trying to be understanding, trying to give Ethan the space he needed while still being a supportive mom. I just wanted to trust him. Then came that phone call from Sarah. She sounded absolutely terrified. She started rambling, saying she'd seen Ethan with a group of people she didn't recognize, in a part of town we never went to, a really seedy part of town, late at night. She said they looked menacing, and that Ethan was acting strangely, not like himself at all. She claimed she saw him take something from one of them, something small and white. He looked like he was buying drugs. Your name, she practically screamed into the phone. I remember my stomach dropping, a cold dread washing over me. But then my protective mother instincts kicked in. Sarah, stop being ridiculous. Ethan would never do anything like that. You're overreacting, as usual. I snapped, my voice sharp with indignation. She tried to insist, to give me details, but I cut her off. I told her she was imagining things, that she needed to mind her own business, and that she was hurting me by even suggesting such a monstrous thing about my son. I hung up on her, my hands shaking, my mind reeling. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. Not about Ethan. He was a good kid. A really good kid. I spent the rest of the day stewing, replaying Sarah's words, dismissing them, then having them sneak back into my thoughts like unwelcome ghosts. The money disappearing, the late nights, Chloe's sudden absence, suddenly, it all started to look different. My perfect Ethan, the boy I knew, the boy I trusted implicitly, started to blur around the edges. Was it possible? Could I have been so blind? I hated myself for even entertaining the thought. It felt like a betrayal. But the doubt, once planted, refused to be uprooted. It festered, grew, and tormented me. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Sarah's frantic whispers, her description of the shadowy figures, the small white something. It felt like a betrayal to even consider it, but a greater betrayal, I realized, would be to ignore a genuine cry for help, even if it was coming from my overly dramatic sister. The next morning, I did something I'm still not entirely sure was right, but at the time, it felt like the only option. I bought a discreet security camera online, one that looked like a regular alarm clock. My plan was to place it in Ethan's room, just for a few days, just to prove Sarah wrong, to put my own mind at ease. It felt dirty, invasive, a violation of his privacy, and every fiber of my being screamed at me for even contemplating it. But the nagging fear, the unsettling questions, were stronger. I needed to know. I needed to see. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, a mother who loved her son more than life itself, but who was also consumed by this terrifying doubt. I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, feeling like if I didn't act, I might regret it forever, but if I did, I might destroy the trust we had built. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have listened to your sister? Would you have secretly watched your son, even if it felt wrong, just to find out the truth? The camera arrived a few days later. My heart pounded as I set it up in Ethan's room while he was at school, carefully positioning it so it looked like a harmless clock on his bedside table. The instructions were simple. It would record whenever there was motion. I felt like a criminal, a spy in my own home. That first night, I couldn't bring myself to watch the footage. The guilt was overwhelming. The next day, after Ethan had left for school, I finally mustered the courage. I downloaded the app, connected to the camera, and started watching. Most of it was mundane, Ethan sleeping, getting ready for school, talking on the phone with friends, doing homework. It was exactly what I expected, exactly what I wanted to see. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, a smug satisfaction that Sarah was wrong, that my son was just as I always knew him to be. I almost decided to take the camera down right then and there. But something stopped me. A voice, perhaps that same nagging doubt, urged me to watch a little longer. And then, it happened. It was late at night, well past his curfew. Ethan snuck in through his window, something he'd never done before. My breath hitched in my throat. He wasn't alone. Another boy, someone I didn't recognize, followed him in. They were whispering, their faces etched with a strange mix of excitement and paranoia. My stomach churned. The boy handed Ethan a small, clear baggie. Inside, I could see tiny white pills. My world spun. My sister's words echoed in my ears. Small white something. It was happening. Right there, on my screen, clear as day. My son, my innocent, wonderful son, was buying drugs. My hands started to tremble uncontrollably. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something. But I couldn't. I just stared at the screen, tears silently streaming down my face. The image burned into my mind. The next day was a blur. I pretended everything was normal, but inside, I was a hurricane of emotions. Anger, fear, profound sadness, a crushing sense of failure. How could I have been so blind? How could my son, be involved in something so dangerous, so destructive? I watched the footage again, trying to make sense of it, trying to find an explanation, a way to deny what I had seen. But there was no denying it. The boy who gave Ethan the drugs was the same one Sarah had described. My sister, the overreactor, had been right all along. And I had dismissed her, even ridiculed her. The guilt was suffocating. I knew I couldn't confront Ethan yet. I needed more information. I needed to understand the extent of this, who he was involved with, how deep he was in. So I kept the camera rolling. Over the next few days, I saw more. Late-night meetings, hushed phone calls, a noticeable change in Ethan's demeanor. He was more withdrawn, his eyes often bloodshot, his temper shorter. He was losing weight, and his usually impeccable appearance was starting to suffer. The star soccer player, the diligent student, was slowly fading, replaced by a shadow of his former self. My heart ached for him, but a cold resolve settled over me. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a detective, desperate to save her son. I started going through his room when he was at school, something I'd never done before. I found a small stash of pills hidden in a hollowed-out book. My worst fears were confirmed. He wasn't just experimenting, he was using. The climax arrived on a Friday evening. Ethan told me he was going to a friend's house to study. I knew it was a lie. The camera had shown me he was meeting the dealer again. I waited until he left, then I called Sarah. I swallowed my pride, told her everything, apologizing profusely for not believing her sooner. She was, as always, understanding and immediately offered her support. Together, we drove to the address Sarah had given me, the seedy part of town she'd mentioned. My heart was a drum in my chest, fear and adrenaline pumping through my veins. When we arrived, the scene was exactly as Sarah had described. A dilapidated house, flickering porch light, a group of unsavory characters loitering outside. And there, in the middle of them, was Ethan. He looked pale, gaunt, his eyes wide and unfocused. He was accepting another baggie of pills, his hands shaking. That was it. I couldn't stand by any longer. I marched straight up to him, Sarah right behind me. Ethan! I yelled, my voice cracking with emotion. He froze, his head snapping up, his eyes widening in shock and horror. The other boys scattered like roaches, disappearing into the shadows. Ethan just stood there, staring at me, shame and fear battling in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What am you doing here, Ethan?" I retorted, holding up the small baggie of pills I had found in his room. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't see what's happening to you?" Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. He crumpled, the fight leaving him instantly. He burst into tears, confessing everything, the pressure from a new group of friends, the initial curiosity, how quickly it spiraled out of control. He admitted to stealing my money, to lying to me, to pushing Chloe away because he was ashamed. It was a heartbreaking confession, a torrent of teenage regret and pain. I held him tight, my own tears mingling with his. The aftermath wasn't easy. That night, we went home, and I spent hours talking to Ethan, just listening, trying to understand. Sarah was there too, offering calm, steady support. The next day, I contacted Chloe's parents, apologizing for my son's behavior and learning that Chloe had suspected what was happening and was trying to distance herself for her own safety. We got Ethan into a good outpatient rehabilitation program. It was a long, arduous journey, filled with relapses, frustrations, and moments of despair. But we pushed through. I went to therapy with him, attended support groups for parents of addicts. Sarah was our rock, always there to offer a listening ear or a shoulder to cry on. Slowly, painstakingly, Ethan started to heal. He apologized to Chloe, and while they didn't get back together, they managed to forge a friendship built on honesty. He found new friends, rediscovered his passion for soccer, and started excelling in school again. It took nearly 2 years, but he emerged from the darkness. Stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of the life he almost lost. Looking back, I still grapple with the ethics of what I did. Spying on my son felt wrong, a violation of his trust. But if I had just believed his lies and my own naive perception of him, I don't know where he would be today. Sometimes, love means making incredibly difficult, uncomfortable choices. It means seeing past the immediate pain of betrayal and focusing on the greater good, even if it means shattering your own illusions. It means trusting your gut, even when everyone else, including your own rational mind, tells you you're wrong. And sometimes, it means listening to your overly cautious sister, even when she's driving you absolutely insane. So, that's my story. It's a messy, complicated one, and it taught me a lot about trust, about forgiveness, and about the fierce, unwavering love a mother has for her child. I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, but I'm grateful for the lessons it taught us all. If you were on my side, if you think I did what I had to do to save my son, please like this video. Subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comment section below. I'll see you all in the next story.